My fiancée cheated with her ex, so I got revenge by hooking up with the women she despised most. Betrayal has a way of rewriting everything you thought you knew. I had been planning a future with my fiancée, believing we were building something real. Then I found out the truth. She was not just seeing someone else. She was sneaking around with her ex, the same man she swore she had no feelings for. When I confronted her, she did not even deny it. She simply shrugged and said it was a mistake. A mistake? That was when something inside me shifted. I could have walked away. I could have taken the high road. But no, I wanted her to feel the kind of humiliation she had put me through. So, I did the one thing she would never see coming. I found the women she despised the most, the ones she had spent years gossiping about, rolling her eyes at, treating like they were beneath her. And I made sure she knew exactly what happened next. Her reaction? Priceless. But what started as revenge turned into something far more unexpected. And I never saw it coming. For years, I thought I knew her. She was everything I had ever wanted. Kind, smart, funny, beautiful. We clicked right away, and I convinced myself that we were perfect together. We talked about the future, marriage, kids, a house of our own. But I never expected this. It started with little things. She would come home late, her stories becoming less believable. She would check her phone constantly, sometimes even hide it from me when I walked by. At first, I brushed it off as nothing. After all, who want to question their partner over tiny details? But one evening, I got a call from one of her friends, someone I barely knew. The message was simple, but it shattered everything. You should know. She's been seeing him again. Her ex. I did not know what to think. My heart raced as I tried to put the pieces together. She had told me countless times that she was over him, that he was just a part of her past. But now I could not ignore the nagging feeling in my gut. The next few days were tense. I watched her closely, hoping that I was wrong. But deep down I knew. I could feel it. And so, I did what anyone in my position would do. I confronted her. Her reaction? Blank, as if she had already prepared herself for this moment. I was trying to move on, she said, her voice low. It just happened. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw everything in her face, the years we had spent together, the trust one had given her. But instead, I asked her the one question I had to know. Did you sleep with him? She looked at me for a long time, then nodded. At that moment, something inside me snapped. It was not just the betrayal. It was the sheer arrogance of it all, the way she acted like it was no big deal. I wanted revenge, not for the sake of revenge itself, but because I needed to take back some control. She had hurt me in the most intimate way possible, and now I needed her to feel it. The hardest part was not the betrayal itself. It was the realization that everything I thought I knew was a lie. For months, I had trusted her with everything, my heart, my future, my life. And in return, she had hidden her affair in plain sight. It was easy to convince myself that it was just a phase, that it was something she could get past. But then I started reflecting on our relationship, how she had become distant, how we had stopped communicating the way we once did. We used to talk for hours about anything and everything. But recently, those conversations had turned into brief exchanges. She seemed irritated by my questions, dismissive of my concerns. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. The late nights, the sudden bursts of secrecy, the absence of affection, it all pointed to one thing. I wasn't blind. I had seen the signs, but I had ignored them, convincing myself that everything was fine. When I confronted her, her reaction left me speechless. There was no apology, no remorse. She simply brushed it off, as if it were a minor inconvenience. She told me, I was just confused. You don't understand how hard it is to move on from someone you were once so close to. It felt like she was justifying her actions, making me the villain for holding her accountable. But that was not what hurt the most. The worst part was how she had trivialized everything we shared. Our love, our commitment, our future, it had all meant nothing to her. To her, it was just a phase, something to escape from when things got difficult. But I wasn't going to let slide. I had to do something that would show her how much her betrayal had wounded me. But I knew it had to be more than just an impulsive reaction. It had to be calculated, and it had to make her feel the way I felt. She had embarrassed me, made me question my worth. It was time for me to turn the tables. I spent the next few days carefully planning my revenge. It was not out of malice. It was about reclaiming my dignity. I knew exactly how to hurt her, and I knew exactly who to target. The women she despised the most. I spent hours thinking about it. The women she despised. The ones she would mock, gossip about, and treat like they were beneath her. It was almost ironic, really. She had such a high opinion of herself, as if her past relationships with these women made them lesser somehow. But in my mind, I saw an opportunity. I knew exactly where to start. The first woman was someone she had never been able to stand. Laura. Laura was loud, unapologetic, and confident in a way that my fiancée could never understand. She was the type of woman who would walk into a room and own it. My fiancée would always make cruel comments about her, often implying that Laura was too bold, too forward. She hated how Laura seemed to always get attention. how men flocked around her without effort. But I had to admit, there was something about Laura, something that made me respect her. She knew who she was, and she wasn't afraid to show it. Reaching out to Laura was easy. We had known each other casually through mutual friends, and there was always a level of attraction between us. But I never acted on it. That was until I found out about my fiancé's betrayal. One night, I sent Laura a message. It was simple, just enough to pique her curiosity. I need to talk. Can we meet up? I did not expect her to respond quickly, but she did. We agreed to meet at a bar downtown. The moment I saw her walk in, looking effortlessly stunning, I knew it was the right decision. She had that energy, that confidence, and she was exactly the kind of person who could help me take back control of my life. We talked for hours. At first, it was just small talk, catching up on old times. But eventually, I could not stop myself from bringing up the situation with my fiancé. I told Laura everything, the betrayal, the lies, the way I had been treated. Laura listened patiently, her eyes never leaving mine. And when I finished, she surprised me by saying, "You deserve better." I cannot believe it. I had expected some sort of sympathy, but her response was different. It was empowering, like she understood the depth of what I was going through and was willing to help me in whatever way she could. That night, we ended up spending more time together. The chemistry was undeniable, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt alive. We ended up leaving the bar and heading to a nearby hotel. The next morning, as I woke up beside Laura, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. I had done it. I had taken control of my situation in a way that would sting my fiancé. But I was not finished yet. The second woman on my list was someone who had always rubbed my fiancé the wrong way. Rebecca. She was beautiful, intelligent, and had an uncanny ability to get under my fiancé's skin. The two of them had never gotten along, and my fiancé had always spoken poorly of her. Rebecca was the kind of person who could easily steal attention without even trying. She was effortlessly elegant, and unlike Laura, she had a quiet confidence that made people gravitate toward her. My fiancé had always felt threatened by her, and that only fueled my desire to go further with my plan. I reached out to Rebecca, and surprisingly, she responded with curiosity. We agreed to meet for drinks, and as soon as I saw her, I felt that same magnetic pull I had always felt. She was just different. She was warm and kind, but there was something else in her eyes, a hint of mischief. We spent the evening talking about everything and nothing, and eventually, I found myself leaning in for a kiss. She did not pull away. Instead, she kissed me back, and for a moment, everything else in the world faded away. The next morning, I woke up in Rebecca's apartment, feeling like I had crossed a line I could never return from. But I did not regret it. When I thought about my fiancée, I remembered her indifference when I confronted her about her affair. I remembered how she had treated me like I was the one who was at fault. The betrayal still stung, but I was starting to feel empowered. As the days passed, I realized something. This was not about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my own sense of self-worth. I had spent so long in her shadow, trying to make her happy, trying to be the perfect partner. But now, I was doing things for myself. The reactions from the women I had chosen were all different. But one thing was clear. They all knew exactly what I was trying to do. I had no illusions. This was not some love affair. It was about getting back at the woman who had betrayed me in the worst possible way. But each encounter brought something unexpected. With Laura, I had rediscovered a side of myself I thought I had lost. With Rebecca, I had found an unexpected connection, something more than just physical attraction. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I was not just doing this to hurt my fiancé. I was doing this because I deserved to feel wanted, appreciated, and respected, something I had not felt in a long time. But the truth was, I had no idea how it would end. As the days passed, I found myself becoming increasingly indifferent to what was happening. The revenge was not about getting back at my fiancé anymore. It had become about something much more personal, about rediscovering who I was and what I deserved. But that all changed the moment I received a text from her. I had not spoken to my fiancé since the confrontation. We had exchanged a few cold messages, but nothing substantial. Then, out of nowhere, she sent me a simple message. "We need to talk." At first, I hesitated. I had no desire to hear her excuses or explanations. But curiosity got the best of me, and I agreed to meet. We met at a cafe, a neutral location where neither of us would feel too vulnerable. When she walked in, I could see it in her eyes. There was something different about her. Her usual confidence seemed to have faded, replaced by a look of uncertainty. She sat down across from me, her hands nervously twisting a napkin in front of her. "I know you've been seeing other people," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I did not respond. I had no intention of giving her the satisfaction of acknowledging her words. I let the silence stretch between us, letting her stew in her own discomfort. "I just want you to know that I regret what happened," she continued, her eyes flickering nervously. "I made a mistake, and I know I hurt you. but I was confused, and I was searching for something I couldn't find with you. Her words felt empty. They were too little, too late. But I kept listening, waiting for the part one had been waiting for. I know I messed up, and I don't expect you to forgive me, she said, her voice cracking slightly. But I want to make it right. I want to try again, if you're willing to give me another chance. I felt a coldness wash over me. It was not anger or bitterness. It was something else. It was clarity. In that moment, I realized something that I had been avoiding for weeks. I was done. I had already moved on, not just physically, but emotionally. The woman sitting in front of me was no longer the person I wanted to be with. For the first time in a long while, I felt liberated. I looked her in the eye, my heart steady and my voice firm. I don't think I can give you another chance. Her face fell. It was a mixture of shock and hurt, but I could see the truth in her expression. She had expected me to fold, to give in, to let her back into my life because that is what she thought I would do. But that was no longer who I was. As we continued talking, I realized just how much I had changed during the past few weeks. The moments with Laura and Rebecca had not been about punishing her. They had been about me rediscovering my own value. I had spent so long letting her define my worth that I had forgotten who I was outside of her. Are you seeing them still? She asked, her voice trembling. I did not answer immediately. I did not need to explain myself to her. But there was something satisfying about her discomfort, the way she seemed to be grasping at the remnants of control. Yes, I finally said, my voice calm but resolute. And it feels good. It feels like I finally matter again. Her face twisted in a mix of anger and disbelief, but I could tell she was beginning to understand. The game she had played, the lies she had told, they no longer had any power over me. As the conversation came to an end, she stood up to leave. There was no apology, no grand gesture, just a final, lingering moment of silence between us. I watched her walk away, feeling a weight lift from my chest. For the first time in what felt like years, I felt free. In the days that followed the cafe conversation, an unexpected calmness washed over me. I had expected to feel a rush of anger or relief, but it was more of a quiet stillness, a sense of freedom that I had not realized I had been craving. I spent the first few days mostly in my own thoughts, reflecting on everything that had transpired. I focused on finding the answers I'd been too blind to see before. Why had I stayed in that toxic relationship? What had kept me so trapped in the cycle of lies and betrayal? It was strange, but it felt like I had shed a layer of skin, and what remained underneath was someone I did not quite recognize but was eager to get to know. The weight of my fiancé's actions had been lifted from my shoulders, but there was something else lingering, guilt. It was subtle at first, like a whisper in the back of my mind. I tried to ignore it, telling myself that I had every right to feel anger and frustration, but it still gnawed at me. I had used Laura and Rebecca as pawns in a game of revenge. While my motives were driven by betrayal, my actions were hardly any better. What did I hope to achieve? Did I think that using others would somehow heal the wound my fiancé had left in me? In my mind, it felt justified at the time. But in reality, I realized it had only added to the chaos and hurt in my life. Despite these feelings of guilt, I found solace in the fact that I had learned from my mistakes. I had grown in ways that I hadn't anticipated, and I now saw my future in a different light. This was the beginning of a new chapter in my life, one where I could finally be free to explore who I truly was, without the shadow of betrayal hanging over me. As the weeks passed, I started to rebuild. I focused on my career, picking up new projects that excited me. I began to reconnect with old friends whom I had neglected during my relationship. I also took time to reflect on the things that I enjoyed doing before my fiancé had consumed all my energy. This was my time to rediscover the man I had once been, to remind myself of the person who deserved happiness and respect. One afternoon, weeks after the meeting with my fiancé, I received a message from Laura. Hey, just wanted to check in on you. Hope everything's okay. I stared at the message for what felt like an eternity. I had not thought about Laura or Rebecca in a while. Life had moved on, and I had assumed they had too. Yet here she was, reaching out with an unexpected level of care. It took me a while before I could bring myself to respond. My initial instinct was to ignore it, to move on without revisiting the past. But something within me knew that I owed her something more. I owed her an apology for using her, even if she had never asked for one. I typed out a message, pausing every few words before finally sending it. I owe you an apology. I never should have let things get the way they did. You didn't deserve to be part of my revenge, and I'm sorry for that. I hope you're doing well. There was a long pause before she responded, and when she did, her reply was simple, yet it spoke volumes. I get it. I'm glad to hear from you. Just take care of yourself, okay? Her words felt like a weight lifting from me. It wasn't about fixing everything. It was about acknowledging the damage I had caused and allowing myself to move forward without that burden of guilt hanging over me. Not long after, Rebecca reached out as well. She wanted to meet, and I agreed, though I wasn't sure what to expect. When we sat down, there was an awkwardness between us, but it wasn't hostile. We spoke briefly, and I could tell that she was aware of what had happened, aware that I had used her to prove a point. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I told her, staring into her eyes. I wasn't honest with you. You deserved more than that. I didn't handle things the right way. Rebecca nodded, understanding the weight behind my words. It's okay. I knew where I stood. I hope you're doing okay now. And with that, we both agreed to move on. There was no lingering anger, no unresolved feelings. We parted ways, but this time, it felt like closure had been reached, an unspoken understanding that both of us had been hurt in the process, but that we were better off without any of the drama continuing. As for my fiancée, I never saw her again after our meeting. I heard through mutual friends that she had quickly moved on, just as I had expected. She found someone new, someone who could overlook the things I could not. But I felt no sense of bitterness or anger. It was almost as if I had been watching someone else's life unfold. I had let her go, and with her, the anger had dissipated. The truth was, I no longer needed to prove anything to her. I had let go of the need for validation from someone who had already shown me that I was not a priority. In the end, my greatest victory was not about revenge. It was about reclaiming my own sense of self-worth and understanding that I deserved so much more than what I had been willing to settle for. It took me a while to accept this truth, but eventually I did. The process wasn't easy, but it was necessary. The anger, the hurt, the feelings of betrayal, all of it faded, leaving behind only a strong, confident version of myself. I had learned that revenge, while sweet in the moment, does nothing to heal the wounds inside. It was the closure, the letting go, the moving on that brought the peace I had been searching for. I could look at my past, now, without bitterness, without regret. It was a part of my journey, but it no longer defined me. As for what came next, I wasn't sure, but I knew one thing for certain. I was no longer the person I had been when I was with her. I was someone stronger, someone who knew his worth. And that was enough for now. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to stay updated on future videos.